Hey, it's Chelsea Peterson here at Cache Valley Counseling with another episode of Puzzle of Us. Today, we are going to be talking about expectations and how to really set realistic expectations in your relationship and how to not get disappointed when we do set expectations and they aren't met, which is probably one of the things that I see most often that couples where they get stuck. And so we're going to talk a little bit about setting expectations, communicating expectations, and then what to do with what happens when my partner is unable to meet those expectations for various reasons, and how to manage that, how to talk about that. So I want to first start just kind of by listing off some of the things that areas in your relationship in which it's really important to have continued conversations about expectations. Different areas change over time as we grow up and mature together and raise kids and have family and life together. Our expectations change, and that is totally normal and totally okay. And so it's important to have those continued conversations often. People often will ask me, well, how often is often? You got to decide that for your relationship. But I would highly recommend at least once a year, multiple times, kind of doing check-ins with each other as you're adventuring together, or as you're doing relationship inventory for the week or whatever it might be, of just like, how's this going for us? And so one of the things or some of the areas that I find most difficult for couples to talk about, or individuals have expectations already set that then they get disappointed when those expectations aren't met. Some of those areas we're going to talk about first is sex, money, family, in-laws, parenting. Holidays are always kind of hard when we're, sort of grown up, celebrating Memorial Day that's happening soon. And our family always went to the graves and visited graves, and other people, maybe my husband didn't grow up doing that. And so that's my expectation, but I don't communicate that. Often we're left with a feeling of disappointment. And then people get hard, and disappointment is a hard thing. We don't ever want to disappoint someone, especially someone we really care about. And so when we do get disappointed by our spouse or our partner, it's hard sometimes to work through that and to navigate that. So travel, like what to expect when we go places together. Some people travel really well together, and some people don't. And some people talk about those expectations. Some people don't. I was just reading Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, which is a really good read, by the way. But she talks about an expectation that she had of when they went to Florida with her husband, and I think several kids, 5 kids or something like that. And she had packed several books and was expecting just to, sit by the pool and read these books while they were in Florida. But they were going to Disney World with 5 kids. And she just talks about how, that was totally, that was maybe her expectation, but her husband sort of helped her check on that as to what is a realistic expectation for going to Disney World with 5 kids and 3 books that you're planning on reading. And so they were able to talk about that and work that in. And then she's less likely to get disappointed. So some other areas that couples often get kind of tripped up is chores or housework. Who does the yard if you have a yard? I grew up with my mom doing the yard, but my husband grew up with his dad doing the yard. And so it's kind of like, well, who does the yard? Do I do the yard, or do you do the yard? And, a lot of times those little things in relationships can cause contention if either one of you don't necessarily like it, or you grew up with your mom doing it, or your dad doing it, or just hiring it out, or whatever it might be. And so setting those expectations. Religion, whether or not you are religious or not, how you're going to bring religion into your home, how you're going to teach religion, how you're going to teach about Christ or being a good person or those sort of things sometimes can be really difficult for couples. There's other littler things like who does bedtime routines and like chores again, like who takes out the trash, who manages the laundry, who does the seasonal clothes changeover for all the kids or for yourself, or do you do that, or who keeps the house organized, who pays the bills, those sort of things. There's all sorts of ways that, going through life, we sort of set these expectations, whether it be from our growing up experience or because, we found that we really like, organizing the bills and paying the bills, and that's something that we really like, or we become more interested in money than our partner. And so it kind of falls to us. But then what happens is that we don't really communicate our wants or needs in the relationship, and it sort of just goes without being spoken. And then oftentimes what ends up happening is people end up feeling very alone in their relationship because they have just taken on and taken on and taken on. Particularly, this is a woman. I'm talking about women in relationships, but that's not always the case. I'll pay the bills and I'll do this to help out, and then I'll just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And after 20 years, kind of resentment builds, and I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm not doing it anymore. And they don't know how to communicate that to their partner in a way that their partner doesn't feel like I've completely failed you and I'm a screw up and I don't deserve your love. And that is certainly the very last thing we want our partners to feel. But being able to communicate it in more effective ways. So why are expectations why are they so important? Why are they so necessary to figure out in our relationships and talk about? One of the things that I believe is that I've seen in working with couples is that when we set these expectations, even if they're unspoken, especially if they're unspoken, we leave a lot of room for disappointment. So I have a personal example here I'll share with you that is very silly, but it started our cycle. And often when our unmet expectations, usually because I don't communicate them in our relationship, that's what happens. If I don't communicate my expectations, oftentimes I will get sad. I'll get disappointed when, the day goes by and my expectation didn't happen. So the two kind of most recent ones, I'll give you two examples. So it was a couple months ago, there was a TV show that my husband and I like to watch together, and a new episode was coming out, and it was his birthday, and I wanted to, we were celebrating him and all of these things, and he was really excited for this new episode to come out, and I fully expected that we would be watching it together. Well, that was not his expectation. He kind of assumed that it was his birthday, he could do what he wanted, right? And just totally fair. But I wanted to watch it with him, and that was not something that we had clearly communicated before this. And so as he was watching this, I was kind of doing my thing and storming around the house and kind of getting really grumpy and kind of short with him. And then after it ended and he watched the whole thing, I was, not very nice to him. And I put the kids to bed, and we put the kids to bed, and he helped out and all of those things. We did our nightly routine. But then I was really, kind of like, don't talk to me. I don't want to talk to you. And very, very kind of upset about the whole thing. And we were able to stop the cycle by him. He approached me and was like, okay, what's going on? Clearly I did something to make you mad. And again, that expectation, I did not clearly communicate that I was looking forward to watching that with him and experiencing that together. And so because of that, he watched it and did what he wanted to do on his birthday, which is totally fine. But that because I did not clearly communicate that expectation, we got into our cycle. And that cycle, again, he then, if we didn't talk about it, in the past would have left us, way miles apart for hours, maybe even days, of where we went wrong. He feels my silence or my snippedness towards him makes him feel like he screwed up. He got it wrong. He's not enough. I'm mad at him for some reason. And that's not a good feeling. And certainly a feeling I don't want to communicate, but that's kind of what he assumes. And I get mad because you don't care about me, or you don't think about me, or you don't care about the relationship, or you don't want to spend time with me. And I take on all of that. Again, none of that is true. But when we get caught in our cycle, those are the places that we go. Those are the things that we tell ourselves that are not true, but are trying to protect us from that hurt and that disappointment. Another example that happened to us recently is, again, something very silly, something very like not huge. But I was expecting the weather was nice outside. We were going to be doing some gardening outside, and I was home from work and he was home from work. And I just kind of assumed that we would be doing some yard work together that day. And I was outside weeding, and he came outside and said, "Hey, I'm leaving." And I got really mad. I was like, "Where are you going?" And he went to change the tires on the car or something, that needed to be done. But I didn't feel like it needed to be done that day. And I didn't communicate my expectation for the day or for the weekend. And it became a blow up moment for us. And when he came home, I said some things like, "Well, clearly you don't want to spend time with us. We're finally home," and, made a jab that was totally not true and not necessary, but that's what happens. And then he, was like, "Okay, I'm not even going to talk to you." So then he left. And so then he leaves, and the whole time he's gone, I'm going over all the reasons that he doesn't care about us, or he doesn't care about me, and he doesn't care about the family, and all of the things that, again, aren't so not true. But I tell myself when I go to those really kind of awful places where I feel alone in the relationship. And going back to that, oftentimes, again, the cycles that we get caught in most often in my relationship are from those unmet expectations. Again, typically not communicated by me. But when we have those expectations, I think that the reason, at least for me, in my personal relationship and what I see when I work with couples, is when I don't communicate those expectations and I expect them, the famous saying of men should just be mind readers and then life would be a lot easier, something to that extent, right? Whatever that famous saying is, if I could just read your mind, right? If I could just read your mind, if I could just read your expectations, then I would be happy to show up for you. I'd be happy to do what my partner wants. I'd be happy to, make the day look exactly how they want. We often will tease my mom, because my mom tends to get really anxious when we have like family parties or we all come over to her house, and she's sort of got these unspoken expectations of how she expects the week to go, or if my sister's flying in from town and she wants us to spend time together and things like that. Sometimes she'll kind of set some expectations, and then she feels disappointed when they don't happen. Or she, sets expectation of she just wants everything to be perfect. I don't know what that means exactly, especially when you have 30 or 40 people at your house sometimes, and, you're having a big family get together, and but at the end of the day, she feels kind of disappointed, or she feels like, not everyone was happy. And again, it comes from a really good place. She wants people to enjoy. She wants people to feel welcome. She wants people to feel loved. But sometimes that anxiousness can be in a detriment to the relationships that are close to her. And so sometimes, we just have to remind my mom to take a breath and clearly communicate her expectations. And I have to remind myself to do the same. And it is very common to happen in relationships in general. So as far as like expectations go and communicating expectations, there's a number of ways that you can do this. Sometimes it's clearly having that expectation. Sometimes it's checking in, like, what do you expect the weekend to look like? Especially if you're both home, or you've got lots of family activities going on, or you have a particular holiday or travel or something is kind of out of the routine. Sometimes it's really easy just to have a conversation with your partner. Just clearly ask, what are your expectations for the weekend, or for today, or for yard work today, or whatever it is. The more specific you can get, the more specific you can be with your partner, and the more likely you are to get your need met. When it comes to things like maybe religion or money, or things that are kind of these ongoing things, sex constantly changing, sometimes depending on the month, depending on the time of the month, I might have a different expectation than when I'm not on my period, or various things like that. So clearly communicating as much as possible, and checking in often. Anytime there is a change, travel sometimes is a really good way to just sort of check in. In our family, we like to go camping a lot. And so sometimes it's okay, what sort of toys are we taking? Are we taking bikes? Are we taking paddle boards? What are we taking? And what are the expectations for this camping trip? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm just taking a book and we are doing nothing for a few days. And I just want to sit and read my book, right? That can sometimes be really helpful in helping yourself and your partner get really clear on what your expectations are. Littler things like chores or various things like that. Often, sometimes we take those really small things, like, I thought we've communicated about taking the garbage out 1,000 times, and you didn't take it out again. And so I'm the mom in the relationship, or I have to be the person who nags at you to do your chores, to do your housework, or to do your thing. And then it feels like I'm alone in the relationship. Those expectations, on the opposite end of having expectations, is a lot of room for disappointment. And when we feel disappointed, we tend to protect ourselves, right? We don't let our partner into that disappointed space, to let them know that they have disappointed us in some way. And so when we feel disappointed, we tend to kind of protect ourselves by shutting down, numbing out, getting loud, being critical, blaming our partner, all those various things. And it tends to kick up the cycle really, really easily between couples. And so when we can clearly communicate those expectations is when we avoid the pitfalls of disappointment. But that's not always possible. Again, sometimes they sneak up. Sometimes we didn't know that we were expecting something. And then lo and behold, we feel ourselves a little bit disappointed because of how the holiday went, or the weekend, or the camping trip, or the way that we're doing money, or we haven't saved money, or whatever it is, right? Like sometimes it creeps up on us and we don't realize it. And so it's really important to have those conversations about, I'm feeling a little disappointed right now. I'm not disappointed in you, or I am disappointed in you. And here's why I'm disappointed in you. And how do we do better together? Because if your partner is able to hear the hurt, is able to hear the disappointment, is able to own it, and able to do better, sometimes you get a very clearer picture. Another personal example is, in our house, Brett my husband usually takes out the garbage. And a couple of years ago, I did an experiment and was like, okay, how long is it going to take for him to take out the garbage? How much stuff is he going to keep stuffing in the garbage before he takes it out? Because it's his chore and I'm not doing it. So I didn't communicate clearly. I didn't say, hey, the garbage needs taken out, or well, can you do that, or any of that. I just kind of went to see how long it would take. And it was a couple of days, and the garbage was very much overflowing. And as I communicated that with him after, like, hey, I'm a little disappointed that I have to be the one to always remind you of that. He let me into a whole world that, just as a woman, I just feel like I don't necessarily understand. And he just talked about how when he walks into a room, if he's like walks into the kitchen, he's not thinking about, what can I do to clean up, or what can I do to take out the trash, or He literally is in a one-track mind of, what did I come in here for? And can I, get the guacamole and chips out of the fridge or whatever, like that. That's what he went in there for. And so that's his single track mind. And I just don't operate that way. And I don't understand that, but it's made it much, much easier. And having that conversation, it's made it a lot easier to say, hey, can you take out the trash? Rather than being resentful of, well, you never take out the trash and therefore you don't love me and you don't want me in the relationship, or you don't care about us. And so I've been able to communicate that and put it on his radar, right? Like, it's not that he doesn't want to do it. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't want to meet my expectation. It's most of the time because it's truly not even on his radar. And oftentimes when you have expectations or your partner has expectations, those expectations, unless they're clearly communicated, cannot be met by your partner because they don't know. They can't read your mind. So we got to help each other out. We got to help yourselves out. We've got to help your partner out by really being able to clearly communicate that. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do you clearly communicate that? And every situation is very diverse, and there's kind of subtle nuances between all of that. But really, just if you have an expectation, if you find yourself hoping for something, whether it be, sex tonight, whether it be, this is how I hope, I want your help wrapping Christmas presents, or this is what I hope for. I want you to take the lead on our family prayers at night, or whatever it might be. There's so many different things. Make sure if you're finding yourself hoping or longing for something, that you clearly communicate that with your partner. And if your partner has a hard time being able to meet that need for some reason, like, hey, I am not going to be able to do that tonight, or, I can't always do the bills, or I can't always, the second Monday or the 15th of every month is really hard for me because I have a big project at work that's due every 15th, or I'm on payroll, or whatever it is, so that it makes it difficult for me to pay bills on that time. Can we move that? And sometimes it allows for adjustments and ways for your partner to show up and communicate, and you come up with a plan together rather than feeling disappointed. Again, sometimes we communicate those expectations and we do end up getting disappointed by our partner. And that happens because we have lots of expectations every single day that come up, and we are bound to get disappointed by our partner, unfortunately. And because of that, it makes it hard sometimes to not build up resentment or feelings of resentment or disappointment towards our partner. And so when that does happen, it is important to talk about it. It's important to talk about how that disappointment makes how I feel, and how I was disappointed in that. And rather than it turning to resentment and continuing to tell yourself that I'm alone in the relationship, or my partner doesn't care, or that my expectations are never going to get met, your partner can show up for you and understand the hurt and the pain and the disappointment that you might feel, or they may have caused you, certainly most likely unintentionally, in your relationship. And so I would encourage you to find a way to talk about the disappointment. It's really uncomfortable. Disappointment is a hard emotion. It's hard to feel, and it's hard to express to your partner that I feel disappointed. But then it allows for a beautiful repair, and for you and your partner to come closer together and be comforted in that space, rather than letting resentment and disappointment continue to build. So those are some of the things that I find most often kind of get in the way of couples remaining close, or being able to be close in their relationship. So the more you can communicate, the more you can show up, the more you can be happy in your relationship, and be clear about those expectations, and be clear about disappointments too. Let your partner be the one to comfort you in that space, even though it's really hard because they're the one that's disappointing you, or I feel disappointed by. it's really healing for a relationship for that person to also be the one who's showing up for you and providing comfort and saying, hey, we got this. Let's try again. Yep, I messed up. I wish I could do better. Here's some ideas of how we do this differently. And it can be really, really healing and helpful for a relationship. And so if you have any other questions, or there's anything as you're listening to this that you want to hear more about, whether it be expectations, setting expectations, how to actually do that, moving through disappointment, having that be a healing part of your relationship, those are all things that that we can certainly talk more about and do. I hope this has been helpful for you as you have listened to expectations and how to set them, and how they really, unmet expectations really kick off our cycle very, very easily. And I hope that in recognizing, I am expecting something here, and how do I clearly communicate that you'll be able to do that with your partner, and you'll be able to find yourself getting your expectations met more often than not. Yeah, it's been a pleasure being here today. I'm so excited for this episode, and I look forward to being with you again on the next one.